This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
My worry is what can get missed is the role of nutrition in how we feel. And when we think of anxiety purely as a condition, we can miss that in some cases, it's a symptom of something else, and it is actually a symptom of iron deficiency. So we feel anxious, our heart can race. I've had women describe to me, it almost feels like this pressure in their chest. Some women describe it as a sense of dread. And and then you resolve the iron deficiency and they don't feel like that anymore.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. Get ready to hear moments that will help you to see the world differently and inspire you to become the happiest, healthiest, and kindest version of you. Welcome back to Things You Can't Unhear. Today we're in for a treat. We have the wonderful Dr. Libby Weaver joining us on the show. She's an internationally acclaimed nutritional biochemist, and we're going to learn all about what that is. She's a best-selling author 14 times over and a powerhouse speaker who's shared the stage with names like Tony Robbins and Sir Richard Branson and Marianne Williamson, amongst many others. But what really sets Dr. Libby apart is how relatable she is and the incredible way of connecting the dots between what we eat, how we feel, and how our bodies actually function. That means the connection between mind, body, and food. In this chat, we talk about something that is currently affecting many people, and that is iron deficiency. And she's so passionate about talking about iron deficiency because it covers how it can impact your mood, your energy levels, your hormones, and even interestingly, your anxiety levels. So we explore if this is actually something you need to address. Whether you're navigating perimenopause or you're constantly just feeling tired for no clear reason or just want to feel better, this conversation is packed with relatable insights and simple tools to help you thrive. And make sure you listen to the end. She gives us a gorgeous glimpse into herself personally, and her answer to what I asked her what might be her last meal, entree, main, and dessert, will make you laugh. So let's get into it. Welcome, Dr. Libby, to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast.
Good morning, Maritza. It's so lovely to be here with you.
I'm thrilled for this chat. Dr. Libby, just like Dr. Phil, you don't need a surname. You're just one name, that's enough.
No, it's not really, but it just flew into my head. When I got my PhD, it flew into my head back in about 2008. So it's remained.
I love it. We all know who you are. You're doing an amazing job at bringing all of your incredible knowledge to the world. And I can't wait to get into what you're passionate about, which is fixing iron first, because I don't think enough of us are talking about it at the moment. And you're doing a great job at raising that topic for us all. But I want to start by asking the question, based on your title, a nutritional biochemist. Can you explain that for those of us who aren't in the medical industry and who don't exactly know what that means in layman's terms?
Yeah, so it's essentially, they're words that I put together to combine the way I was educated. So I toddled off to university and actually ended up being there for 14 years, which I know makes me sound really thick and like I failed everything. But I originally studied nutrition and dietetics and then did honors and then a PhD in biochemistry. So I merged the two degrees and into that word. So I actually look at everything through three lenses: biochemistry, nutrition, and emotions, or you could say mindset. And I bring that together in all the work that I do, whether it's a book or an online event or whatever. Even my supplement company is created through that lens. So I help people to understand that every second there are billions of biochemical reactions going on in our body, and they create how we look and feel and function. But for every biochemical reaction to occur, nutrients are needed. So for example, for substance A to be converted into substance B, that's one biochemical reaction, and then B becomes C, C becomes D, and on that cascade of change continues to go. But let's say for substance A to turn into substance B, we might need magnesium, vitamin B6. And if we're deficient in either or both of those nutrients, then that reaction won't occur efficiently. And so then that substance A starts to accumulate, and then we don't have enough substance B. And maybe with the right amount of substance A in our blood, there's no problem. But if it starts to accumulate, it is a problem for our health. And also too, we don't have enough substance B and therefore C, D, etc. And without enough of that other substance B, maybe our energy is compromised, or our sleep is no longer restorative, or we struggle with our mood. But we're not really taught to look at our health in that way. So a really great example, Maritza, actually is, and because I'm obsessed with iron, I can't help but relate so many of my examples at the moment back to iron. We literally need iron to be able to produce thyroid hormones. And I think a lot of people know that iodine and selenium is really important for thyroid function, but I feel that iron was forgotten in that, and it's literally required to make thyroid hormones. Plus, it's essential for us to be able to convert inactive thyroid hormone T4 into active thyroid hormone T3. Selenium's needed for that reaction as well. But so many people have poor iron status and an underperforming thyroid. And there's a phrase I use in my work: the road in is the road out. So I always want to know what's created the dysfunction or the problem, because correcting that thing will improve it for the other person, for the person. So that's a great example of nutritional biochemistry in action, the requirement of iron for the action of thyroid peroxidase, an enzyme to be able to make those hormones. So
are passionate about the iron, and I love this this holistic view of medicine that you've got, is that food, the mind, and the body connection. And that's, I think, what we all crave for when we go and see our doctors and our medical professionals, is that holistic approach to all of the symptoms and issues and the healing that we're wanting to bring into our world. Now, we're going to jump into iron because I see the passion, and then I want to talk more about who you are at a human level as well. But let's talk about iron and how it relates to where we are in our lives at the moment. What are symptoms that we see if we have low iron? So if we're experiencing low iron, what are some symptoms that will present in us?
So the first thing is fatigue, and it's so easy right now to just write off fatigue to being busy or stressed or modern life. And so we often don't do anything about it, but it's essentially fatigue that persists and or fatigue that is not restored from a good sleep. So that's part of it. Also, our heart can race. We might notice heart palpitations. And as well, a conversation I'm really wanting to highlight is one around anxiety. So anxiety is actually a symptom of iron deficiency. Now, I'm not saying for a second that all anxiety is caused by iron deficiency. This is another great example of the road in is the road out. But right now, there's this tendency in our culture to really, I guess, just talk about anxiety as purely psychological or from a psychiatric perspective. There's a real tendency to medicalize emotions at the moment. And I'm not denying for a second that that is not helpful. Of course, that can be the most perfect and supportive road for someone to go down, for them to get an outcome and feel better and improve their quality of life. But my worry is what can get missed is the role of nutrition in how we feel. And when we think of anxiety purely as a condition, we can miss that in some cases it's a symptom of something else, and it is actually a symptom of iron deficiency. So we feel anxious, our heart can race. I've had women describe to me, it almost feels like this pressure in their chest. Some women describe it as a sense of dread. And yeah, and then you resolve the iron deficiency and they don't feel like that anymore. So that's another one. Our hair falling out is another one. A pale face, or you can pull down, obviously very gently, but pull down your eyelid and have a look inside your eyelid, and it should be lusciously red, but it's sometimes a bit pale. That can be another sign of iron deficiency. There's a lot of overlap in the symptoms of iron deficiency with an underactive thyroid, and also some of the symptoms we currently attribute to perimenopause. So it's why it's really important to do testing so that you know what's creating those symptoms for you, because iron deficiency affects our periods as well.
Crikey. I know there's a lot of women who listen to this podcast. There's men as well who may be partnered with women around this age bracket as well in our, 30 to 55-year-old bracket, probably thinking, oh God, that's me, like checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. And there were quite a few things that you mentioned there that I can relate to personally. I had my bloods done recently, and it was a normal level. My iron was a normal level of 18. So, what are you hoping to see the range of iron when you get bloods done?
So when we see our GP to get blood work for iron done, it's called iron studies, and that's 4 tests: serum iron, transferrin saturation, and ferritin. So serum iron is a reflection of our recent dietary intake, what we've eaten, perhaps if we've taken a supplement. Transferrin, though, it actually goes high or high end normal in iron deficiency anemia. So it can be confusing if you get a blood test back and you see an H for high beside one of your iron related tests and you think, oh, there must be too much of this. I must have too much iron. But no, transferrin is actually a taxi that drives iron around. So if you think the body will produce more taxis when it wants to pick up more passengers, and the passengers is iron, obviously. And so we elevate the production of transferrin when your body is seeking more iron. So you can think of it as iron hunger. So the normal range in Australian and New Zealand pathology labs for transferrin is 2 to 3.6 grams per litre. But once it goes above, so obviously if it's high out of the normal range, that's a big problem. That's usually iron deficiency or iron deficiency anemia. But even if once it's above about 2.6, I'm going to see that as the body actively seeking more iron. So that's a key test. Another one too, of course, is ferritin. So ferritin is our iron storage. And the normal range for women across the menstruation years for ferritin is 20 to 220 micrograms per litre. And in my clinical experience, that bottom number is way too low. So I've had lots of women over the years who they'll have, say, a ferritin of 22 and they're told that they're fine, there's nothing wrong with their iron, and yet they feel so lousy. And so I've noticed clinically, and there's also good research to show this, that sometimes ferritin below 50 is actually a problem. So I encourage people to get their ferritin to a minimum of 50. And I've had other women describe that they feel much better once that's at more like 80 or even 100. Think of it like a backup battery. And it's because it's the iron in storage. And there are obviously patches in our life where we might go through times where there is more significant blood loss with menstruation. And obviously, I'm someone who always wants to get to the heart of why something is happening. So when someone has really heavy periods, we want to sort that out. We want to correct that, because that, for example, can be the thing leading to the person not being able to retain the iron. But when we are going through times like that, that's one reason why we want decent ferritin, so that if we do have a significant bleed, or it might be in perimenopause, we're bleeding 2 or 3 times in a month, then you've got those reserves there rather than really depleting yourself.
All right. So I actually called my doctor yesterday and I got my bloods sent to me because I thought I just want to see what you say is normal compared to what the labs say are normal. So can I just tell you what mine are? And if you agree, I'd be
Yeah,
really
I'll write it down.
interested to see if
I've
it's
got to
the
look at
same.
it so I can get it in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so iron, I'll let you get your pen and paper out so you
Yeah,
can write
got
it
it.
down. All right. So my iron level is 18. My transferrin, which you were just mentioning, is 3.1. My trans sat is 23 and my ferritin is 73. Do you need any of the others or are they enough?
No, that's enough. And do you eat red meat or take an iron supplement?
I don't take an iron supplement, but I do eat red meat occasionally.
Okay. So the transferrin at 3.1 is a sign to me that your body is seeking more iron. Your ferritin is very good at 73. That's pretty good, but you're in a patch where your body, that the transferrin says to me that your body is actually seeking more iron. So, but the blood level of 18 is very good. So I feel that what you're doing is you're very much on the right track. I probably would just increase that red meat a little bit, the frequency of that a little bit.
Okay, that's good to know because I just wanted to check what you look at compared to what lab results come back. Because sometimes you have different practitioners who will look at results and say, I'd like that particular thing to be a little bit higher, where sometimes it comes across normal in lab results. So it's very comforting to see. And, you know, that whole red meat discussion, let's have that right now, because I think a lot of people, you know, we've been pulled away from red meat a lot. Tell us why red meat is still so important, and if we are having it, what's the best source, and where to shop for it, really.
So the way I look at it, Maritza, is that as all species, we want to make sure that each species on the planet is having what I call a species-specific diet. So we eat in a species-specific way. So that means that what we consume, we want that to have been having a species-specific diet. So for cows, that's grass, it's not grains. And the fatty acid profile of even the fat in grass-fed versus grain-fed animals has been shown to be distinctly different. And the grass-fed fat is far more beneficial for us as humans, and obviously it's way better for the animals themselves. So if people are, it's interesting. When I was still seeing patients, it was very clear to me when it was deep inside them that they were to eat in a vegan or vegetarian way. So there are some people, when you sit with them and you can genuinely feel how important that is to them, and it's part of their identity, or it might be part of their religion, and so it's deeply personal and deeply important. So my job as a nutritionist, nutritional biochemist, is not to change how they think or see that. That's their choice. My job was to make sure they were getting all of the nutrients they needed when they were eating that way. And you can do that when you eat vegan or vegetarian. You just need to be very, very focused on certain nutrients to make sure you're getting enough of them, because it's not necessarily as easy. And certainly if you're having coffee and a piece of banana bread for lunch, or you're living on a lot of ultra processed food and eating vegan or vegetarian, you're going to be missing out on iron, for example, and usually zinc as well, or other nutrients as well. So whereas there are other people who eat in a vegan or vegetarian way because they're doing it out of, the simplest way I can say it is peer pressure, or it's very common sadly amongst teenage girls right now. There's this, it's almost like a perfect storm. They start to menstruate, and that's when their iron requirements increase. And it's around that time that they're often being exposed to social media, and they might be, you know, admiring of someone or want to be like someone, and that person might eat in a vegan or vegetarian way, and they might be promoting how great that is, and that person may or may not be very knowledgeable about how to do that so that they're nutritionally really nourished by eating that way. But the young girl who's watching that video doesn't know how to do that or understand how to do that. So right at a time where she needs more iron, it's going through the floor. So we can get enough iron and zinc, as I mentioned, when we eat vegan or vegetarian. We've just got to be really focused, and we've got to know what we're doing. But my worry is that there are some people who do it, as I said, as a trend or a fad, or because they feel pressured to by their peers. And that's when I might have had a conversation with someone to say, you maybe want to think that through. And in the meantime, these are the nutrients you want to focus on, because we know, for example, that the RDI for iron for menstruating women is 18 milligrams per day. And if we eat in a vegan or vegetarian way, we multiply that RDI by 1.8. And I'll explain why in a second. So it takes it up to 32.4 milligrams per day. Now, it's very, very difficult to eat that much iron through food alone. So supplementation is almost always required. Obviously, blood tests are the only real way to know. But the reason that the RDI, when we eat vegan or vegetarian, the reason that it's elevated is because the iron is all in non-heme form when we eat vegan. And
What does that mean?
It's the structure of the iron and its bioavailability. Our ability to absorb it is nowhere near as good as heme iron. So that's why the message that comes with eating non-heme iron sources is we need to include it. We have to eat it with something acidic. And that's why we're told to have it with vitamin C, because vitamin C is essentially ascorbic acid. And it can, a bit of high school chemistry for everybody right now. So non-heme iron is in what's called the ferric form, which is Fe3 plus. Humans can't absorb that. We absorb Fe2 plus, which is the ferrous form. So the body has to convert it. It's got to lose an electron, bit of science, and the acid does that. So the vitamin C does that so we can actually absorb it. So that's one reason why when we eat in a vegan or vegetarian way, the RDI is increased. And the other reason is there are components in vegetables that otherwise have great health benefits, but they can bind iron and interfere with its absorption. So things like phytates, oxalates, tannins, all of that, we tend to have more of that when we eat bucket loads of veggies, and it can interfere with that non-heme iron absorption as well. So the RDI is that much greater. So yeah, it's fascinating. The mechanisms of absorption of iron, I could talk to you underwater about that all day, but we won't do that right now. But in a nutshell, heme iron is absorbed using a little truck, a little transporter called heme carrier protein 1. But the non-heme iron is absorbed via a different type of truck called DMT1, dimetyl transporter number 1, and it transports not just iron, non-heme iron, but also calcium and zinc. So it's used to transport all sorts of nutrients so that we can end up having those nutrients interfere with the absorption. But there's a really groundbreaking research has been done looking at a different form of iron. It's actually found in peas, in legumes, and it's called ferritin iron. And it's been extracted from peas and concentrated and available in a supplement form now that's not constipating. And it has its own unique absorption mechanism. It has a big silly name called endocytosis. And the ferritin iron is actually absorbed intact inside this beautiful little protein shell. So our gut cells aren't exposed to free iron, which can drive inflammation and oxidative stress. So as far as supplements go, the ferritin, seek out one that's made from ferritin iron from organic peas. It's very bioavailable and doesn't drive constipation.
Oh, that's good to know. And this is the 14 years of university coming out. Look at this. This is just so knowledgeable. I love it. Are supplements as effective as food can be, or would you obviously say food first and then we supplement when we don't have the right food intake that our body needs?
I am a food first person. It's just that for a lot of people, it's very hard to eat enough iron across those menstruation years to actually meet those requirements. So to put it into perspective, 18 milligrams is just over half a kilogram of beef. And I'm not suggesting people go out and smash that much beef, but and iron is widely spread throughout all sorts of other foods. It's in mussels, it's in parsley, it's in seaweed, it's widely spread throughout all sorts of food. But my point is, so many, particularly women, unfortunately, these days still live with a real dieting mentality is the simplest way I could say it. They eat with restriction as their driver. So very few women I meet eat for satiety or eat for nourishment, eat for great energy, eat for robust health. It's still for too many women all about staying small, being small, restricting, so controlling their body in some way. So I've met a lot of women who still skip meals. As I mentioned earlier, have coffee for lunch. So it's very difficult to get enough iron going in. So that's why I think it's very important to consider supplementation, not as a replacement for a great way of eating, but I live obviously in the real world and see what people choose, and you can't always support someone to start eating lunch when they haven't been eating lunch for the last 10 years. So so filling those gaps with supplements, high quality supplements, can be very helpful for some people.
Amazing. All right. I love getting your insights on that. I want to go back a little bit to anxiety because I think this is a big one that I just want to tap into a little bit more. So if someone is experiencing anxious feelings and emotions and has been for some time and hasn't been able to get to the bottom of it and hasn't checked their iron, you're saying check their iron. Do most GPs, so if we're going over to our doctor and we tell them we're experiencing anxiety, do you feel like most GPs are checking iron levels at the moment?
Yes, they are. I find that there are other tests that are really tricky to get done, but most GPs are really happy to test iron just because it is the most common nutritional deficiency in the world. And for the laboratories to do it, it's fairly inexpensive. So yeah, they're very happy to check it.
Okay, so that's a good point if anyone's experiencing that symptoms of anxiety. You mentioned hair loss as well, and I think that's that's been coming up a lot in my friendship group at the moment. And so I do want to bring that up is, this hair loss situation that I think women in their sort of perimenopause and menopause years seeming to experience more and more. You're saying that could potentially be linked to low iron as well.
Yes, I am. So it's another great example of the road in is the road out. So
Yeah.
it can be, hair loss can be caused by all sorts of different drivers, and it's finding whatever it is for you, for the individual. I think iron deficiency has been hugely overlooked. It's almost like, and you sort of alluded to this in the beginning, which I loved. It's sort of like other nutrients have become a bit cooler. So magnesium gets talked about a lot, vitamin D gets talked about a lot, and that's all true. They're really important, but I feel that iron is being overlooked in a lot of people's sort of ways to look after themselves, and it's sort of been forgotten. So yeah, so if it's iron deficiency that's driving the hair loss, then correcting the iron status actually helps the hair to start thickening up. If it's an underactive thyroid that's driving the hair loss, because that can be another one, then sorting out the underactive thyroid is what will restore the hair. But again, that's another kind of rabbit hole, because what leads the thyroid to become underperforming or underactive, it can be related to nutrition. So the big nutrients for a fantastically performing thyroid are iodine, selenium, zinc, and iron. But then also our sex hormones can change what's happening with our thyroid. The thyroid loves progesterone and it doesn't love an excessive amount of estrogen. So that can be contributing to the thyroid underperforming. It can also be almost like a post-viral effect. So if someone's had glandular fever, for example, Epstein-Barr virus, they might notice that their thyroid blood test results went off after they had glandular fever. And so you can imagine that whatever's creating it, the strategy to resolve it is different for everything I've just said. Stress is another one. So you think of adrenaline, one of our stress hormones, it speeds everything up. So it speeds up our heart rate, for example. Thyroid hormones also speed things up. That's why we have a problem if we don't make enough thyroid hormones or we make too many. There's this beautiful homeostatic, this medium amount that is fantastic for everything inside of us to work really well. Now, so when we've got high circulating levels of adrenaline and everything's being sped up, we get really uncomfortable with the symptoms that drives. It's just that in modern life, we blame it on modern life. We think it's just how life is. We think it's normal for us not to be able to sleep. We think it's normal for our heart to race, for us to feel tired but wired. So we just adjust to all of those things and blame it on life. And when we do that, we don't act to change it, but it's all feedback. It kind of can get uncomfortable at times. I wrote Rushing Woman Syndrome about that. But we don't necessarily, we might want to change it, but we don't know how. And so we live with it. And eventually the thyroid says, my human is so sped up that she is, if I keep churning out this amount of thyroid hormones, she'll blow the lid off. She'll blow a gasket if she keeps making all of these hormones. So the thyroid starts to wind back thyroid hormone production in an attempt to slow down what's happening on the inside. Now, in that situation, there's nothing wrong with the thyroid. It's just a response to the persistent elevation of stress hormones. So that whole scenario can also lead to hair loss, as can insulin resistance. So insulin resistance occurs when the body starts to essentially go deaf to insulin signal. So if you imagine the fasting glucose range sits between about 3 and 5.6, 4 and 5.6. And a lovely fasting insulin sits at about 5 as well. So let's say your blood glucose is at 5 and your fasting insulin is also at 5. That's really healthy. But if your fasting glucose is at 5 and your fasting insulin is at 15, that's insulin resistance. So that's your body having to churn out 3 times the ideal amount of insulin to keep your blood glucose inside that normal range. And that too, that essentially what that drives long term can be an elevation in androgens. So androgens are male sex hormone. We call them male sex hormones. Women make them as well, though. Testosterone is an androgen. There's also androstenedione. There's quite a few androgens. When our androgens start to elevate, and that does, there's a natural androgen dominance at menopause as progesterone, as ovulation ceases and progesterone, we don't get the lovely big surge anymore. We just make a tiny bit from our adrenals, and the ovarian production of estrogen has significantly dropped. There's just a natural dominance in our androgens. Whereas when someone's insulin resistant, it can push those androgens high, and we end up with an excessive amount of androgens, and that excess in androgens can drive head hair loss. So there's all sorts of biochemistry that can go on at any point in our life, but it's very common, I think, for that cluster that I've just described, whether it's low iron, an underperforming thyroid, and insulin resistance. It's very common for that the effects of that to really be felt at perimenopause. And I worry that those things get missed, because when we blame symptoms on perimenopause, we're essentially saying it's our sex hormones driving the symptoms. And of course, that can be the case. I'm not denying that for a second. Our sex hormones have a profound impact on how we feel and function and look. But my worry is that when we just say, oh, it's just perimenopause, we don't dig deeper. And if it's iron deficiency driving the hair loss, or your thyroid's not working as well as it once did, or it's insulin resistance, or all three, then that doesn't get corrected when you have the mindset, oh, it must just be perimenopause. So I'm a big fan of looking at metabolic health at all stages of our life, but particularly across that perimenopausal transition. It can be game-changing to how we experience it.
100%. And I've got a couple of friends who are experiencing alopecia at the moment. One in their 30s, one in their late 40s, and they don't have a lot of options, is what I'm finding. So it's great to hear your take on it, ask those questions. All right, so I want to play a little bit of a lightning round with you now, and just gauge your thoughts with, you can give me short answers if you like, on the following things. Okay, so gluten in our diet.
Some people deal with it no problem. Others have a big problem. Lots of people live without knowing that they have a problem digesting it, and have certainly, if you've got any sort of autoimmunity or that in your family, it's a really fantastic trial to go without it for a minimum of 4 weeks and see how you feel.
Oh, do you eat gluten?
No.
No, neither. Okay. Coffee. Do you drink coffee? And what do you think about that?
I think so. Caffeine from any source leads to the production of adrenaline. And for some people, that just makes their brain focus a bit better for a couple of hours. Whereas for other people, adrenaline is the hormone behind anxious feelings. And if you're already really anxious, a coffee can push you into a really uncomfortable place. And I feel like not enough people understand that. So there's no hard and fast rules. I just encourage people to be really honest with themselves about how caffeine affects them and adjust their intake accordingly.
Do you drink coffee? We want to know what Dr. Libby's doing.
Yeah, at the moment I do, absolutely. I've had patches in my life where I've cut it out though.
Yeah. Dairy versus plant milk.
So again, highly personal. I think a huge amount affects is where our genetics impacts that to a point. So for a lot of people, the consumption of cow's milk is still relatively new in human evolution. So for example, people of Asian heritage actually can't digest it very well at all. It's so new in their food supply. So the largest number of lactose intolerant people we see is who are people of Asian heritage. So I don't think there's one size fits all with it. I have never really understood why we would want to drink the milk that is intended for a baby cow to grow up. I've never understood that, just as forget the nutrition part of me, just as a human, I've never really understood that. So in my clinical work, what I know, and I learned this from an allergist, so a medical doctor who had trained in allergic medicine, he taught me that when people had a chronic history of things like recurring ear infections or recurring tonsillitis, Streptococcus was the bacterial species that was driving those infections, or the person might have had recurrent bronchitis or croup, or they might have been someone who had asthma or eczema growing up. as adults, they might be women who have symptoms that we associate with an excessive amount of estrogen. So it might be fibroids or really heavy bleeding, for example. I find those people do well being dairy free. And when I say dairy free, I mean casein free. So one of the proteins in cow's milk. So when you've got that history, then I have found clinically that cow's milk is not their friend. So again, it's a good thing to, if you have that history, it's a really good thing to do a trial for 4 weeks, super strictly without it. So eat like you have an allergy, and notice if it makes a difference. And if it doesn't, if the symptoms that you're trying to work on don't resolve by going dairy free, then bring it back.
Okay, love that. Processed sugar and artificial sweeteners.
So I am not a fan of artificial sweeteners at all. It's been fascinating for me watching those be introduced to the food supply and everyone talking about how terrific they were and didn't affect blood glucose and how safe they were. And then we learned down the track that some of them have really concerning health consequences. So the problem, as humans, we've eaten sugar forever. Sugar is naturally, obviously present in vegetables. Even our spinach contains some sugar because in the same way animals, we have fat as fuel for lean times. Plants have sugars to get them through those lean times. But obviously sugars are in vegetables in really small amounts. There's a bit more in our fruit, in a cob of corn, in a teaspoon of honey, but that's all food that we've eaten for a very long time. It's obviously the processed food where the sugars are concentrated and they're the problem. So we're currently told by some of the major health organizations around the world that it's okay to have 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. I'm not so sure about that, but that's what we're told is okay. But regardless of that recommendation, on average in Australia and New Zealand right now, we're having 37 teaspoons of added sugar per person per day. And if you do that every day, that's 45 kilograms of sugar that you're eating each year.
Whoa.
So it's the amount that's the problem.
Wow, it's astonishing. What about tap water? And I'll say it from an Australian perspective because that's where we both are at the moment.
So I grew up on rainwater. I have the privilege of still being able to access rainwater. I think anyone can throw a tank on the side of their house. So I'm a big fan of people doing what they can with water. I don't ever want to make people feel frightened about water because we have to stay hydrated. And I worry sometimes that we, with the best of intentions, can place fear into people. So I think we do what we can. If you can filter your if you can only drink tap water and you can afford a filter, then fantastic, do that. If you can throw a tank on the side of your house and drink rainwater, then fantastic, do that. So do what's within your reach financially. But if I had to choose, I personally would choose rainwater.
Rainwater. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, I've been drinking filtered water for at least 5 years and don't drink tap water. And when I do drink tap water now, I just taste such a difference. And so it's so hard for me to drink tap water now. So I do find such a big, massive taste difference between the two, which is fascinating to me. All right. So I'm asking this for those who listen to this podcast, they'll laugh because my husband is a wannabe biohacker and he was fasting last time I last time I interviewed a guest, health related guest, but he's fasting again. So I think he's on day 4 of no food. What do you think about long-term fasting like that?
So I'm never going to put something down that someone benefits from. So it's highly individual. And I think partly where we go wrong with health advice is we make blanket statements that if it's good for me, it must be good for everyone. And it's not the case. I worry that when people hear cold plunges are a great example of this. So obviously they've become incredibly popular, and some people thrive when they start to include those and embrace those into their lifestyle. Whereas I meet a lot of people, particularly women, who are very depleted. So in Chinese medicine, they would call it, there's not a lot of qi. So they're very low in energy on the inside and nutritionally depleted usually as well. They feel the cold terribly. So they're the first person to put a jumper on in a room. in my opinion, that it's not wise. It doesn't make any sense for those people to cold plunge. They need to foster recovery and resilience and restoration. And for me, that comes with warmth, not from cold. So back to fasting, though, there are some people right now who I think they just live like that. They're naturally drawn to it. They feel fantastic when they're living that way, or they go through patches. It sounds like your husband does days, strings lots of days together, whereas other people do it within their eating windows each day. And there are people who are just naturally drawn to that. It's almost like it's not even an effort, that it's just how they naturally live. Whereas for other people, they do it for weight loss. They do it for, it's just another diet. It's just another way to kind of not get to the heart of why they don't consistently look after themselves. And I put the word consistently in there very purposefully, because none of this is about perfection. I think the pursuit of perfection is almost like a mask that fear wears, where our health comes from what we consistently do, how we eat, drink, move, think, breathe, believe, and perceive. So the pattern right now with intermittent fasting, for example, is a lot of people have dinner really late and then they don't have breakfast until 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And again, not putting something down where someone feels like they're thriving, but I know a lot of women who lose their periods when they do that. And I'm a big fan of women eating breakfast. And if you think about fasting, other than Labrador dogs, we're the only species who has to be told to stop eating. All other species just eat a meal and then stop. There's not that overindulgence. There's not that going back for more. And so I find that really interesting. And obviously we now understand there's lots of people in the work doing great work looking at what processed food is doing to our insulin response, to leptin, to our body's ability to actually hear our hunger and satiety signals. They're hugely disrupted by certainly by persistently elevated insulin, and that's a worry. So if you're naturally drawn to fasting, I'm a big silly story, Maritza. I was at a conference a long time ago now, and a hilarious professor of medicine walked onto the stage, and he said, but he didn't even introduce himself. He just said, "What time do babies and old people want to eat dinner?" And the whole room said 5 o'clock. And that's when we usually are hungry, but a lot of people are just getting home from work then. And they're hungry. So they'll smash a packet of crackers, a pot of hummus, a block of cheese, half a bottle of wine. And then they'll think, oh, but I haven't had dinner yet. So then they have dinner as well. And it's just it's kind of way too much food. So we're naturally hungry at 5, and it's not practical for everybody to eat dinner then. But my message is eat dinner as early as you can. And then you just naturally have a fasting window and then get up and have breakfast the next morning. So, but again, it's the way your husband's doing it with days and days strung together without food. He probably feels fantastic at the end of it. And I imagine he's got decent muscle mass and he's got pretty robust health. Whereas for someone who is really exhausted and doesn't have good muscle mass, so there's not a lot of, their metabolic activity is low, they might find that even more depleting. So it's what's right for one person's not always right for another.
Perfect answer. I love that. And thank you for covering off cold plunges, because that was my next one. What about alcohol in moderation?
Yeah, so it's well, the science version is we take in alcohol, ethanol, and the human body can't excrete that. We have to convert it into a crazy long word that no one needs to remember, but it's called acetaldehyde. And then acetaldehyde gets converted into carbon dioxide and water, and it leaves our body. So when alcohol enters, the liver goes to work very quickly to convert it so that we can get rid of it, because if alcohol itself accumulated in our blood, it's so poisonous to us that we would go into a coma and die. So when a unit of alcohol arrives at the front door of the liver to prepare it for detoxification, zinc is needed for us to be able to make an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. So for people who drink regularly, they often deplete themselves of zinc because it's got to be prioritized and used to produce that enzyme so alcohol can be detoxified. But then that might mean that we don't have enough zinc for a robust immune response or luscious hair or healthy bones or whatever, all the other things that zinc is needed for. So it's a depleter of zinc. So I won't quote the health organizations from around the world obviously have recommendations as to how much is okay. I don't tend to quote those because I think we know in our own heart when we're having too much of something, and whether that's alcohol or caffeine, sugar, processed food, takeaway food, whatever it is, we know when we're having too much. So what I care about way more is, why would you continue to do something that in your heart you know is harming you? That's where the juice is, because we can use all sorts of substances to hurt ourselves or to sidestep feelings, or because of deep pain, we use all sorts of substances to do that. And some people choose alcohol as the substance they use to sidestep those sorts of things, or shift essentially how they feel, or to not feel. And that's very different from a random Friday night at the end of a hot day and having a beer because it was a really hot day. That's a very different relationship with alcohol. So I'm far more curious, I guess, about people's relationship with alcohol. I can remember a patient saying to me, she didn't drink every week, but when she drank, she shared with me, she behaved in a way that she just didn't like. She felt that it was aspects of her personality would come to life that she was mortified that were sort of inside her. So she didn't have, you know, if you looked at that on paper, you wouldn't say that that person was she wasn't over consuming alcohol, but it led her to have all sorts of challenges with relationships when she did drink. So I remember her saying to me, I'm just going to have 100 days without it and just see what happens. And that was about 8 years ago. So she never went back. But I feel that it's our own relationship with it, I think, that needs examining. And if you struggle with it or you don't like your behavior, no matter how much you have, I think it's really worth exploring, but without judgment. I think it's a really good thing to explore with curiosity about how it's serving you, rather than because we will always continue to do things where we perceive we're getting more benefits than drawbacks. And but that's a whole different conversation.
The relationship with alcohol conversation is a great one, and I truly believe that is a huge focus for many people, because you're right, people do self-medicate with alcohol. But curious what you think of might be the most beneficial drink. If we were going to drink, what alcoholic beverage do you think would be the better one for our health?
So I surprise a lot of people with this answer, but it's beer, because
Wow.
it's so low in alcohol. So 4%, essentially one standard drink is 10 grams of alcohol, however that comes. So that's a 4% bottle of beer. That's a nip of spirit. So vodka and soda would be another choice. If you're just satisfied with one. So that's 10 grams of alcohol. We get 10 grams of alcohol from about 140 mils of champagne or bubbles, and about 100 mils of wine gives us 10 grams of alcohol. The trouble with wine is that when I used to see patients, this is way back in the early days of doing that, I would say to someone, do you drink alcohol? If they said yes, and I'd say, what type? If they said wine, I had some red water in my cupboard and a wine glass, and I'd pull it out and say, can you show me what a standard pour is? And anyone who's sitting with a human like me is not going to pour what they usually do at home. They're going to pull up short. I'm aware of that. And no one poured less than 200 mils. So, which is 2 standard drinks. And so I met a lot of people over the years who would share a bottle with their partner, and sometimes most nights of the week. So that's about 400 mils of wine, and which is 4 standard drinks, which is way too much, particularly for most women.
Yeah.
Because our liver is so key to estrogen metabolism, and alcohol is a big disruptor of healthy estrogen metabolism. So, and again, but if you think about catching up with your favorite human, you can do that with sparkling water with some fresh lemon. You can do that over a cup of tea, or you can do it over a glass of wine. So it's so often the thing when we're doing something we love, like connecting with our favorite person, we link it to what we're doing rather than the connection. So it can sometimes help to see that it's the connection we love rather than the drink. But also too, I'm never going to say to someone, don't do that, because of it's almost like soul food. If the wine is part of it, that's kind of soul food. But if you're doing that all the time, it can become a problem. It's what we do every day that impacts on our health. It's not what we do occasionally.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of chat here too, I've noticed throughout your stories and what you're sharing around energy, but not in a physical sense. It's energy in a almost a metaphysical sense, in a vibe, in a feeling, in what makes us thrive, what makes us happy, what brings us joy. I want to tap into that a little bit, because how does that relate, do you think, to our physical health? Like, how do the two interact with one another?
Yeah, it's huge. You know, when people are, I'll give you an example. So I think there are when I'll focus on food first, it's almost like a spectrum. There are people in the world who, when it comes to what they put into their most extraordinary body, they need to care a lot more and live with, I think, to live with more appreciation and to live in awe, even just for moments across our day, in awe of our body and everything it's doing. We wouldn't make half the choices we make if we lived a bit more in touch with that, I think. But there are people who need to care more. But then there are people at the other end of that spectrum who are so frightened of food that they would benefit from eating some hot chips, and not every day, but relaxing. Because when you're really frightened, there's no health. You can't be healthy when you're that frightened. So it's sort of where joy comes in. If you're avoiding socializing because you're worried what the person is going to serve you, you can be missing out on some really extraordinary conversations where someone might say something, you might contribute to a conversation that has a big impact on someone else's heart, or they might say something that impacts your heart that you go away and think about for days, and it changes some of your choices or the direction of your life, to be really extreme. But so my point is, sometimes when we avoid connection because we're really frightened of food, it can mess with our joy, and it can mess with connection and even learning and insight. So joy is, it's tricky. So I'll say to someone, I can remember lollies was a funny one for me. I sort of always understood why patients ate chocolate, but lollies were just another world. I was like, tell me why, if you eat lollies, tell me why you eat lollies. And it was usually, people would say things along the lines of comfort. But again, I'd say lollies can't hug you. They can't thank you. They can't appreciate you. They can't take your grief away. But we ask food to do all sorts of things it can't do. For other people, they'd eat lollies for, they'd say it's kind of like sweetness in life. So having something to look forward to at the end of a day. And so again, we're asking food to do things for us that it was really never designed to do. So if you use food as joy, see if you can list some other things that bring you joy and connect more to those things, to see if you can then rely on poor quality food less for that joy. So I think a joy is obviously a huge part of health, but that's not to say that sadness and grief aren't either, because that's often where we learn from those places. So it's not to deny or try to avoid those emotional states that we find really challenging or uncomfortable. All of it can foster everything can foster our growth if we're open to it. So when I say joy is a great thing for our health, I don't want people to think that if you're not joyful, it's hurting your health, because it isn't necessarily.
I love your answers. They're so precise, and they give me exactly what I need, which is beautiful.
Oh,
Thank you for that. What's something that we would never catch Dr. Libby eating?
um, breakfast cereal out
Yeah.
of a packet.
Yeah. Me neither.
That would not be. It's hard to name something. I think sometimes, I know this is not the angle you're coming from, but sometimes when people ask me that, I think they are looking for me to say, oh, I would never eat hot chips. I love hot chips. They're delicious. I just don't have them very often. And again, it harks back to, if you're having hot chips 3 times a week, your health is very different than if you're having hot chips 10 times a year. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I eat what I I'm fortunate that my taste buds love food. My taste buds don't love junk. So
Yeah,
I don't really think about junk.
me too. If you had your last meal, I want to get to know you a little bit more. Your last meal has been called. You need to have an entree, a main, and a dessert. Tell me what your entree would be, your main, and your dessert, and who you'd be eating with.
I'd be eating it with my boyfriend.
Good choice.
What I would eat is really tricky. So if you were to ask me, one of my favorite flavors is lemon juice. I hang out for it. So I can squeeze a lemon in the morning and just drink it. That is, so if it's my last meal, I would actually probably have lemon juice because I would miss that. That hit on my tongue is just the best thing ever. So probably, I know that's not food, but I would have lemon juice.
Lemon on the food. Okay, we're doing lemon on the
No, I'd
food.
literally just have a shot of lemon.
All right, that can be your entree. What's
That's
your
my
main?
entree. Mm. Um, it would have parsley in it because I love parsley. Maybe lamb shanks and mashed potato and green veggies with a big handful of parsley on the top.
Okay, these are very unique answers, Dr. Libby. I love it. And what about dessert? Don't forget this is your last meal.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have it because it ruins the savory. I love the lingering of something savory on my tongue. I love salt way more than sweet. I'm not much of a sweet person. So I'd skip dessert because it would ruin the lingering on the palate from the main.
You're going to be getting to those pearly gates and they're going to say to you, just eat the cake, Dr. Libby. No.
I really like it.
I
It's
love
not
you
my
sharing.
vibe.
I love you sharing that. Thank you so much. What do you truly believe defines happiness in your world?
Living, being your authentic self. So I think so often we pick up all sorts of things in the first half of our life, all the shoulds, it might be other people's values. And when I say values, I don't mean ethical preferences like kindness and generosity. I mean, sort of what does our life demonstrate that we value? And yeah, so I think it's the more authentic we are, we sort of unlearn, we come into the world authentic, and I think we learn all sorts of things that aren't necessarily us. And then in adulthood, we get the opportunity, I think, to unlearn some of those things and become more of who we truly are. And I think there are these moments where tears come to your eyes with the authenticity and truth of the moment, and there's probably nothing happening, but or you might notice the feeling of the breeze on your skin, or you might be looking at the stars at night while you take the rubbish out, and you're just in absolute awe, and there's this extraordinary gratitude, and it's beyond happiness. Happiness is kind of like an understatement. There's this awe and wonder that bursts forward from you, and so it's just, I guess they're the little moments, but it's when you're just yourself and you're really comfy with that. I think that's a crazy gift, and it's beyond happiness though, isn't it? Or for me, it's beyond happiness.
I heard you say that you ask yourself this question, how do I need other people to see me?
Mm.
What does that question mean to you?
So I'll answer it personally in a second. I developed that question to help people see the behavioral traits in themselves that they were trying to prove to others are in them. So I first came up with it when I wrote Rushing Woman Syndrome, and because I think that book was all about living with the persistent production of stress hormones, because I think we stress because we care. If we didn't care, we wouldn't stress. But beyond that, beyond caring about others, we usually care what they think of us. And I developed that technique to help people identify the traits they really wanted other people to see in them. So the way you need your mum to see you might be different from the way you need a colleague to see you. So it's a really helpful exercise to do. And the next time you're stressed, pause and consider, am I perceiving someone is seeing me in the opposite way to my forward words, in the opposite way to these traits that are really important to me? So for me, the first one, big one, is kind. I need others to see me as kind. And part of what I work on most days in a very quiet way is that I already am that. And whether people see it in me or not is okay, and being okay with that. So, because when that came to light very clearly for me when I wrote Rushing Woman Syndrome back in 2011, and it was, you could see that all these rushing women who that was the first word out of any rushing woman. How do you need others to see you? Kind, thoughtful, selfless. They are the top three. And they are that, but they will run themselves ragged. They will literally sacrifice their own health, ensuring that others see them that way. And so we need to cultivate I speak to myself when I say this, we need to cultivate flexibility in how we can handle other people seeing us. Otherwise, our days can end up quite stressful for reasons that we don't necessarily understand. So kind is my answer.
That's beautiful. All right. Well, based on the title of this podcast, Things You Can't Unhear, has there ever been a moment in your life where you heard something that you simply could not unhear?
Yes, and I wrote it. So it was from wherever it came from. I felt like my mind didn't come up with it. But I wrote, most people think the opposite of stress is calm. The opposite of stress is trust.
Hmm.
And it's when I've sat with it, it was to trust the unfolding, and we forget to trust. And I think that life is this most extraordinary self-created symphony, and it's all unfolding to foster our growth. And everyone's journey is so unique and so different. And sometimes the lessons, I call them course correction lessons, to help us become more authentic and who we truly are. Some of the lessons are really glorious and some of them are really painful, but I honestly believe that it's all for us. It's not happening to us, it's for us, even the genuinely tough stuff, which at the time you don't necessarily see, but when you can trust that it's for you, you know that it's on the way, not disrupting your way. And that allows you, that reminds me to trust, and to trust the unfolding of it all. So, and then you feel really excited, even when it's not.
Yeah. You've already left such an impact with the work that you do on many, but what going forward from this day on, what's the impact that you want to leave on the world?
Oh, you're so lovely to ask that. I can't bear unnecessary suffering. And it'll sound like a massive mission, but I want to end iron deficiency globally. It is unacceptable to me that it is the most common nutritional deficiency worldwide. For example, there are very attentive parents whose youngest might be iron deficient, and they're not addressing it because they don't know, but they could address it if they knew. And then there are children from really hard places who go to school without breakfast. And then there are children in developing countries who don't have access to iron-rich foods. So I'm on a real mission to do what I can to bring that back to the light, and talk about it more and take action on that, and do what we can to resolve that globally.
Thank you so much for your beautiful time today. I've enjoyed every moment of talking to you, Dr. Libby. We'll put all of the links of where people can catch you in the show notes. And big message out there, go get your iron checked if you're suffering symptoms that are not serving you. Thank you again.
It's been a joy to chat. Thank you so much for having me, Maritza.
Thanks for listening to the show. What did you think? And what did you feel? Let us know by leaving me a message on the Things You Can't Unhear Instagram community page. And if you can, give us some ratings love on your favourite listening platform.